We're just going to have another quick conversation with Professor Deborah Tickle. She's a tax professor at the University of Cape Town. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Pleasure.
Of course, one of the hot topics is that we are in an unequal society. Some people have said that this is an austerity budget, even though, in fact, government has actually been increasing expenditure, perhaps although rejigging the priorities. So, I mean, what are your thoughts around a wealth tax, and where could government be innovative about it without sending everybody offshore?
Interesting point about sending everybody offshore. But I think the thing to remember with wealth taxes is that we already have quite significant wealth taxes, being estate duty, donations tax, securities transfer tax, which is when shares are transferred, and transfer duty when properties are transferred. We also have to remember that municipal taxes are a form of wealth tax, albeit that they're not seen to be, because they do provide services, but they are based on value of property. So in some respects, they're almost like a land tax. So we do have those forms of wealth taxes. So any additional tax that you want to call a wealth tax would actually mean that those would have to, if it's an annual tax, those would have to go away and it would have to replace it. Wealth taxes are hugely administrative. So you would have to have a whole body of people brought into SARS, you'd have to put in the legislation, and then you'd have to administer it. And what the rest of the world has found is that these types of taxes tend to cost a lot more than what is collected. And we've seen countries giving up their wealth taxes, like India and France just over a year ago, have thrown away their wealth taxes. So that isn't going to be the answer, not in that form anyway, where one looks at what are the value of your assets, which is anything. I mean, assets go down and up, as we've seen. There's been a drop today in the share markets, so people's wealth has suddenly dropped. It's very, very difficult to apply. So the sort of thing one would be better looking at is looking at a solidarity levy, I mentioned it earlier, yes, which would be on people who are still earning well and earning dividends. So the people who are still earning versus the people who've lost jobs or have nothing. And that would then be used temporarily, I keep saying that, temporarily, to plug some holes, create the ability for infrastructure, perhaps assist with extending the basic income grant until people are able to look after themselves again.
And then, of course, what you're saying about perhaps doing this solidarity tax issue is, at the end of the day, we've seen that during COVID, while a lot of people lost jobs and economies went into recession, the wealthy actually got much wealthier. Yes. I mean, people like Elon Musk in the United States, South African born, I mean, he multiplied his wealth over the COVID period. So, and whilst other households have been suffering due to COVID and the impacts it's had on the economy, it just does seem quite unfair. And even though you say technically it might be difficult, it does seem unfair that the wealthy are sort of allowed to get away with it, if I can say that.
Well, I think one has to define wealth. So yes, I mean, somebody like Elon Musk is clearly, or Bill Gates, they are clearly ultra wealthy and they give quite a lot away. But one has to remember that a lot of wealth is fictitious, if you want to call it that. So as I mentioned just now, to give an example, if you held 100,000 rands worth of Steinhoff shares on the 5th of December 2017, you would have suddenly found you held 1,500 rands worth of Steinhoff shares. It was a fictitious wealth. Okay, that was due to fraud. But world events can affect the value of shares, of property. If we have trouble in South Africa, then the value of property will decrease. It won't hold the same wealth. So taxing it is, as I say, until it's realized or there is death, it's actually a sort of misnomer. So what we do instead, and it's a very good way of doing it, is we say, as a South African legislature, that we must tax wealth when it's realized. So we have capital gains tax. That's not a wealth tax as such, but it does tax the wealthy because they are realizing. We have these real wealth taxes. And we have a very progressive system of income tax, because the rate at which we reach 45%, or the level at which we reach it, is about half of what the level is in the UK, for example. So people are paying 45% a lot quicker. And that's why to tax people, say with a solidarity tax, for too long will create the desire to actually, I can't do this anymore, I'm feeling much poorer, my assets have gone down because Russia's just invaded Ukraine or something crazy like that, I'm going to get out to a safer place. And we can't do that. We need those taxpayers. There's so few of them who are actually paying. The other thing, sorry to say this, but the other thing that South Africa is doing is putting people like Judge Davies into SARS to assist them to investigate the people who are wealthy who are not paying their taxes. And that's very critical. People must pay their taxes, because if they don't, the rest of us pay more.
Professor, we're going to have to leave it there.
Thank you. Hear the bell going.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to go for a quick break. That was Professor Deborah Tickle, pardon me. She is a tax professor at the University of Cape Town.